Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a fascinating and, honestly, kind of shocking aquatic medical mystery. Have you ever walked past an aquarium and noticed a goldfish that literally looks like its gills are turning inside out? Well, if you have, then you've seen exactly what we're investigating today, the case of the curled gill.
It's a really alarming sight, right? And it forces us to ask, what actually causes a fish's protective armor to just peel backwards? What exactly causes curled gill on goldfish? Because make no mistake, this isn't just some quirky cosmetic feature. It's a massive structural failure that leaves their super delicate respiratory tissue completely exposed to the elements.
To figure out this aquatic crime scene, we first need to identify the victim, which is the operculum. Basically, this is a vital, multi-component bony structure found in teleost fish. Think of it as an intricate assembly of four main dermal bones that act as a heavy-duty protective shield for the gills. But it's not just armor. It also mechanically runs the bucco-opercular respiratory pump. It's an absolutely crucial one-way valve that lets the fish breathe efficiently. So when this shield curls or breaks, the entire respiratory system is totally compromised.
All right, let's line up our suspects. Today we'll be looking at the anatomy of the defect, and then our four main suspects: the genetic blueprint, environmental toxins, nutritional deficiencies, and mechanical trauma. Finally, we'll wrap up with diagnosis and aquatic surgery.
Let's start with Part 1, Anatomy of a Defect, the missing shield.
You can clearly see how drastically shortened a semioperculum defect really is. Instead of having a nice, smooth, flat shield covering the side of the head, the bone is basically stunted. It leaves those highly sensitive, deep red gills completely out in the open. In the veterinary clinic, this condition is known as opecular dysplasia. So, moving on to suspect 1, the genetic blueprint, inherited structural flaws.
What's super fascinating here is the difference between a real structural defect and a total visual illusion. Over 1,000 years of intense artificial selection has totally rewired goldfish DNA. On one hand, you have the actual curled gill variety. This is a recessive skeletal mutation intentionally bred into certain fish so their opercular bones permanently curl outward. Crazy, right? But then, on the other hand, we have a total visual red herring called the MAT gene. This is an incomplete dominant mutation that just strips away the iridescent guanine pigment. The bone is perfectly intact, but it's completely transparent, like glass, so the red gills just show right through. To an untrained eye, it looks broken, but it's actually structurally solid.
Now on to suspect 2, environmental toxins, specifically invisible poisons.
This brings us to every aquarist's worst nightmare, new tank syndrome. Think about the nitrogen cycle. It transitions from raw ammonia to nitrate and then to nitrate. Well, if a fish tank's biological filter hasn't built up enough of that good, beneficial bacteria to process the waste, you get these massive caustic ammonia spikes. And that raw ammonia acts as a direct chemical irritant that literally burns the extremely delicate gill tissue of young fish.
Here's the really crucial part. As those young gills get burned by the ammonia, the tissue swells up as a defense mechanism. It's called hyperplasia. Now, in young fry, their gill plates aren't hard bone yet, they're just soft, flexible cartilage. So this swollen gill tissue basically acts like a giant internal pressure wedge. It physically pushes out against that flexible juvenile operculum. As the fish grows up, the plate hardens into solid bone while it's still stuck in that flared position. Boom! The curled gill is now a permanent structural scar.
Let's move right along to suspect 3, nutritional deficiencies, also known as the collapsing scaffold.
This is such a wild example of how a curled gill can literally stem from a breakdown in the fish's dietary supply chain, basically from the inside out. Get this, goldfish actually cannot synthesize vitamin C internally, but they absolutely need it as the biochemical scaffold for forming their collagen matrix. If a growing fish is fed degraded, old food that's missing vitamin C, that biological scaffolding just completely collapses, leaving them with a shortened or totally malformed bone. And then there's pantothenic acid, or vitamin B5. A deficiency there triggers nutritional gill disease, where the gills themselves swell up so much they functionally force the operculum completely open. Which brings us to suspect 4, mechanical trauma, or aquatic accidents. Our final suspect isn't some slow developmental thing or a quirky gene, it's sudden, violent physical trauma.
Let's be real, goldfish are strong, but they are famously clumsy swimmers. A missing chunk of their gill plate is very often just a permanent scar from a totally random aquatic accident. We're talking unprotected filter intakes, sucking them in, super strong siphon vacuums tearing at them during tank cleaning, aggressive nipping from tank mates, or even a terrifyingly close call with a pond predator like a heron or a neighborhood cat. And because these complex bony structures have very little regenerative ability, a split-second accident usually means a lifelong physical defect.
All right, we've identified the culprits. Let's look at Section 6, Diagnosis and Aquatic Surgery, and see how we resolve the crisis.
First off, we really have to understand the immense physiological toll this defect takes on the animal. A broken opecular seal acts as a massive, constant energy drain. They completely lose the efficiency of their respiratory pump. What does that mean? It means they have to basically hyperventilate just to survive, which leads to tachycardia. Because they spend so much energy just trying to catch a breath, they suffer from stunted growth due to sheer metabolic exhaustion. Plus, those exposed gills are passively leaking salt all day long, causing huge osmoregulatory stress. It is literally like having your lungs turned inside out, constantly fighting a losing battle just to breathe.
But there is a solution, and the medical intervention here is absolutely incredible. Aquatic veterinarians can actually perform specialized surgery to correct the curl. First, they carefully sedate the fish using an anesthetic called MS-222 directly in the water. Then comes precision trimming. They use these tiny sterile microscissors to snip away the folded membrane. Step 3 is honestly mind-blowing. Sanding. The surgeon actually sands down the fish's bony edge using ultrafine P1000 sandpaper so that it regrows perfectly flat. I mean, wow. Finally, they move to post-operative care, placing the fish in highly oxygenated water with antibiotics to guarantee a safe recovery.
Ultimately, this whole case of the curled gill is way more than just a weird biological quirk. It highlights a really deep, ongoing conflict between our human aesthetic desires and the actual functional well-being of the animal. The prevalence of these opercular gaps in the hobby is a direct reflection of this tension. We're constantly balancing the desire to breed for highly specific, unique visual traits against maintaining the basic, everyday health of the fish.
Today, a lot of reputable breeders are starting to prioritize structural integrity over bizarre, extreme shapes. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. Knowing the severe respiratory and metabolic costs to the fish, the nonstop struggle for oxygen, the structural failures, the massive stress, should we really continue intentionally breeding for extreme visual mutations? Just because we can breed for these crazy biological anomalies, does it actually mean we should? Think about that the next time you're admiring a highly modified fish. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking the big questions.